Well, I'm Ron Burton, President of Rotary International, and I want to welcome each one of you and anyone out there to our Google Plus Hangout. I'm absolutely delighted to be the first president of Rotary International to have a Hangout. I've actually watched President Obama on his Hangout, so I think we're in very good company today. We have on our panel today Alex Quadrado, Bilal Ayubi, Aaron Wagner, Christy Govertson, and Mitty Chang. And I would like to get this started by asking some questions. I think hopefully you know that one of my main focuses this year is in new generations. As a matter of fact, I'm leaving Evanston tomorrow to travel to Chennai, India for my first New Generations Conference. And it'll be one of 5 that we'll be doing around the world this Rotary year. So with that, and we'll talk about that probably a little bit later toward the end of our broadcast, Biddy, I would like to ask you, what has been your most meaningful Rotary experience?
Good morning, Mr. President. So I think that's a great question. So I started off as an interactor in 2004, and I've been with the Rotary family since then. And I would definitely say the Salt Lake City Convention in 2007, my first Rotary International Convention, has been by far one of my most meaningful Rotary experiences, in the sense that Interact already taught me, and having been in Rotaract at the time, showed me the value of bonds and the friendships you can make through the Rotary family. But it was that international convention that really opened me to how big Rotary International is and how many members around the world who come together for a common purpose of bettering the world. And that's something for a young professional, and I was just a college freshman at the time. But that's something that's eye-opening. It's an opportunity that not everyone gets, especially when they're young. And it's something where I see Rotary as a vehicle to carry out my goals and to change the world. And that's something, and a big reason why I'm so involved with Rotary now and why I want to continue my experiences.
Thank you, Biddy. How would you answer that, Alex?
I think mine is, in a way, similar. I was involved with Interact for a while, and then I attended RILA, Rotary Youth Leadership Award. I actually went the summer after my high school sophomore year, and that was the summer right before going abroad to Italy for a year with Rotary Youth Exchange. And in many ways, RILA changed my perspective, and I went into my year abroad with, like Mitty said, new eyes, and that made that year one of the best I've had. And since then, I've been involved with RILA as a counselor, which is even more rewarding because I get to share with the new generation of future Rotarians what I received 4 or 5 years ago.
Christy?
Yeah, actually, I've been in Rotary about 8.5 years, so I've had a lot of chances to have these, Rotary experiences. Probably for me, one of the most meaningful ones was when I first became the district membership chair here in District 5100. I was running a workshop, because that's what we do, and it was a typical, idea sharing and best practices, and very quickly it took a turn into some people revealing some things about themselves. People were, we're talking about suicide, we were talking about bullying, we were talking about really painful experiences, and I had an epiphany in that moment that completely changed my trajectory in Rotary, and that was that people, are in pain, and not just because we're either struggling with membership or successful with membership, but just on a human level, and that we had a lot more in common than we had in our differences. So I found that particular moment to be extremely meaningful because it allowed me to really adjust sort of my leadership role a little bit, as well as really began connecting with Rotarians on a really different level. And I've really enjoyed that and had a chance, I just really like connecting on that human level. So that was really meaningful for me. So probably a little bit different than some of the other Rotary experiences.
I think we all have similar but different experiences, which makes Rotary even that more meaningful to us and allows us to share our Rotary experience with others in basically a testimonial format. How have you been changed by your involvement with Rotary, Erin?
That is almost a difficult question to answer because it has influenced my life so much. I don't even know what I would be doing without it. However, I think the role of mentors is what has changed me the most. In school or in work, people are around you, like managers or teachers, to help you progress, but at the same time there's kind of a ceiling to the level of progression you can achieve, because particularly when you're an entry level into a new corporation having graduated from college, they need you to be an underling, so to speak. So the role of mentors in Rotary was particularly important for me because here I was surrounded by fantastically accomplished and competent and good-hearted professionals, people in the top of their field in my area, who were willing to take 15 minutes to sit down and explain to me how to do everything from the most mundane filling out a form to run a community garage sale to understanding the wider practices of project management on our Rotaract projects. And that level of mentorship, Mitty, I was glad to hear your mention before. My mentoring experience hit its peak when I was working on the Salt Lake International Convention. Because I had been involved in Rotaract for so long and was living in Salt Lake, when the convention came to Salt Lake, they hired me to be their secretary. And so every day I learned how to do finance balance sheets from local Rotarians. I learned how to submit grant proposals from local Rotarians. And most importantly, I learned how to be a compassionate and competent person.
Bilal, how has your life been changed with involvement in Rotary?
I would agree, sir, with Erin when we say that it changed a lot, and it's like a whole lifestyle that you start adopting while you join Rotaract. I started as a Rotaractor in 2004, and in 2 years I became the president of my club in 2006. And a few days after I started as a president, a war started in Lebanon, in this country, for like 33 days. And the Rotaractors, Rotarians, everyone was so involved. The whole district was involved in relief, support, and aid to the refugees and so on. And at that point, I decided to move from the focus that I was doing in the university, which is more of finance and banking, into development. And then directly after graduation, I started working with the UN, and now I work with the USAID. Probably this whole track in the career got inspired by my work as a Rotaractor at that year.
Wonderful. Alex, how would you respond to that?
I think in many ways, before I became involved with Rotary and Rotary youth programs, I led my life in a way that everything I did was so that I could put it on a resume. And I feel that a lot of people, especially in the U.S., live that way. And I think Rotary kind of opened my mind to doing things because they're good, not because they'll look good. And that's something I definitely got out of RILA and Youth Exchange and Interact. And in talking to people that I've met through those programs, they've had similar experience. So I think that's been one of the biggest changes for me, kind of doing things because they're going to help people.
Yeah, great. You know, these programs look very different depending on which part of the world you're in. What makes Rotaract, Interact, RILA, or Youth Exchange unique in your area? And we'll start with Bilal.
In fact, I would say even in our area, in my district, 2450, which includes 10 countries around the Middle East, every country has a different characteristic regarding, let's say, Rotaract. For example, in Cyprus, most of the Rotaractors are over somehow 25 years. They have already graduated. They're young professionals. Some of them are even in their early 30s, and they find it difficult to leave Rotaract because they enjoy it. In Lebanon, it's different than. Am I muted or can you hear me?
No, you're doing fine. Go ahead, please. Can you?
No, okay, sorry. Yeah.
I can hear you. I don't think they can. But.
Yeah. Okay. So even in Lebanon, for example, I discovered that there's a difference between here and other countries where Rotaract here is more of community-based rather than university-based, like in the US maybe or North America, and also a lot of Rotaractors here are young professionals. We just started in Lebanon a few years ago the university-based clubs, and they are new, but they're expanding quite a lot. So I think yeah, even the Raila aspect here in Lebanon, it's a national Raila that everyone gathers in one annual event rather than having a club, Rotary Club Raila like in other places. So it's definitely a unique experience everywhere you go, based on the culture, based on how people perceive it, and what do they really want from it.
Okay. Do you have Ryla clubs there?
We don't have Raila Club. Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
Ryla camps?
yeah, definitely. We have at least one nationwide Raila that we do every year, and it gathers around 200 to 250 participants. So and yeah, a lot of also young leaders join from Jordan, from Egypt, Cyprus, depending on the year, definitely.
Aaron, can you respond to that, to the differences, to the similarities?
Yeah, so the Rotaract club that I was in Salt Lake, I now live in Minnesota and I'm a Rotarian, but when I was in Salt Lake in Rotaract, one of the defining characteristics of our club was that we were very small. I think there were only 9 or so of us, but we were incredibly ambitious, almost foolishly ambitious. We took on projects that were so huge and that ran us into the ground sometimes, but we almost couldn't help ourselves. We were in a position where the world was our oyster and anything was possible, and we were going to go out and test the limits. So I think one of the defining characteristics of the Rotaract Club that was there in Salt Lake was the sense of vision behind it. We were few, but we were strong.
Okay. Alex?
I'll speak a little bit about Ryla. From what I understand, Ryla in different parts of the world focuses on young professionals, kind of the Rotaract age group. One thing that I've seen in the U.S. I've worked with Ryla in Colorado, Iowa, and Cape Cod, and all of those have been geared towards more of the Interact age, or even younger. We have Rylas for 13-year-olds, but most of them in the U.S. are for the 16, 17 age group, which I think is really effective. And you know, all of the Rylas around the world are really effective, and they target different groups. But I really like kind of catching people, getting them into the loop earlier, and I think that's one difference with Ryla around the world.
Christy?
Actually, I was going to note that surrounding my district and the other districts, they do the Ryla, that high school sort of sophomore, junior year, you know, sort of between the sophomore and junior year. Our district is different than that. We're more, I think, like the other parts of the world, where our Ryla is for 19 to 28-year-olds, and it is primarily run by Rotaractors. So almost everyone involved in Ryla, whether from the from the leadership on down, are basically young professionals, and it's definitely one of the primary ways Rotaractors recruit new members in our in our district, as well as Rotarians, because a lot of the Rotarians, of course, go out and provide different leadership components during the week. But it gives us definitely some direct contact with young professionals over the course of that week. So I found that to be an interesting model, considering I think, like he was saying, that most of the Rotaract or most of the RILA models in the North America are that high school age. So, yep.
Mindy, do you want to chime in on that as well?
Sure. But I want to chime in with a perspective that I think I've picked up with just North America in general. And that's the perspective on not just Rotaract, Interact, RILA, all three of which I've done, but also about Rotary in general. And it's that, there's that common question. I think your focus this year has been really primarily on membership. And it's interesting to see that what happens is, with the world's population being about 50% of it under the age of 35, a lot of our culture in Rotary International and with the Rotary clubs has been, in North America at least, primarily noon clubs. There are a lot of breakfast clubs, are noon clubs, but there aren't that many happy hour clubs. And it's interesting because as a young professional, right, in North America, we live in a 9-to-5 culture. And it's something where I've been able to see, you can't leave your lunchtime an hour and a half and plus commute for a Rotary club. You can't, and asking a young professional to wake up at the crack of dawn may not be that reasonable either, just the way I think most of us are. And if we start work at 8 or 7:30, that automatically means we miss a Rotary club meeting. And I think we're fortunate enough here that everyone on this call is such a huge supporter of Rotary. And I know there are some new gen Rotarians in here, but for myself, the biggest struggle is not if I'm going to join Rotary or not. Interact, RILA, Rotaract has already solidified my commitment to it. It's a matter of when. And for me, it's which club I'm going to join. And it comes down to the fact that most of the clubs don't really meet my criteria right now. They don't meet during happy hour. That's the best time, I think, for a young professional to meet. And especially when you don't manage a business, or maybe you don't call the shots, or maybe your schedule is not as flexible as a Rotarian's, or I guess every Rotarian who's in a noon club or a morning club. So, I mean, part of this is we're having a conversation. So I'd want to know what your opinion is on everything, and why don't you facilitate? I know we're a grassroots organization, but why don't you facilitate perhaps the message that we need to start more happy hour clubs, or we need to start more happy hour satellite clubs? Not saying that a noon club and a morning club can't also meet during happy hour and attract some younger professionals.
Well, I'm on your side on this. I ask Rotary clubs all the time, and Rotarians, take a look at yourself and your club. Would you join this club today? If not, why not? And if not, what are you going to do about it? But I would say, and I don't know the demographics, I think you're in Fremont, Mitty, is that correct, California?
Yeah, in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Yeah, I thought, I don't know exactly the demographics there, and I don't know off the top of my head whether there are any cocktail or after 5 clubs or not, but I, for one, would certainly be excited to sign a charter for a new club of young gen members. And if we can get a new gen club started with members under 35, I would do my best to come and be the charter banquet speaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll hold you to that.
Not that that appeals to anyone, but I'm really excited about what we need to be doing in this area. And I spoke to the Evanston Lighthouse Club this morning, and my line to Rotary clubs is, the new generations are not our future. They are our now. And we better realize that, and we better figure out a way how we, as Rotarians who've been in Rotary for a number of years, can make that transition from whatever new gen program we're talking about to the next one, to eventually to becoming members of a Rotary Club as easy as possible. We seriously need to be taking all of our young generation group and having them join us at projects, working side by side with them, and not treating them as, you know, nice young people. They are nice young people, but they're our equals. Now, I don't know if I said anything anyone liked or not, so if you want to respond to that, I'm delighted for you to do so.
I love it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Are you okay with that, Mitty?
Yeah, that was
Aaron?
perfect. Thank you.
Aaron,
I really like that as well, and it reminds me of something I heard at the Hawaii Peace Forum when they were addressing the youth. They said, "You're not the leaders of tomorrow; you're the leaders of today." And I like that you share that philosophy.
well, that's excuse me. That's what the New Generations conferences are all about. When I looked at the program for the one that's coming up this weekend in Chennai, I said the last thing I want to come to Chennai to do is to hear a bunch of old men like myself talking to a bunch of old men like me. I want to hear the new generations talking to all of us about how we make Rotary relevant and attractive, and how we make the transition to Rotary membership as easy as possible and as welcoming as possible. So that's the focus of all 5 of the New Generations conferences. So I'm hoping we have some great success with that. We've got some tremendous members of all of our New Generations groups. You know, as I look across the spectrum of Youth Exchange, Interact, Rotaract, RILA, and alumni, I consider former ambassadorial scholars that we've not done a very good job of attracting, former group study exchange team members. These are all great people that we've put a nice investment into, and we haven't tried to incorporate them into our programs, and it's time that we did that. So Rotary's programs for young people are often viewed as a way to develop future Rotarians. But what additional value, and I think you've somewhat touched on this in terms of our first question, but what additional value do you think these programs provide? And we'll start with you, Christy.
Obviously, some of the other panelists have talked about leadership and mentorship. I actually think that one of the things that Rotary provides, whether it's the programs for Rotaractors, Interactors, RILA, but even as a Rotarian in our Rotary clubs, I think it's a playground to try out new ideas. We have a lot of people, a lot of different geography, a lot of different demographics, and I think that there's a lot of creative possibility there, and it really is an opportunity to try new things and innovative things, and that's why I think some of the best ideas have come out of our Rotaract clubs, our New Gen clubs, and some of the younger Rotarians, because it's a place to try that out. So that's a great opportunity. You don't get to do that everywhere.
Well, that's a great answer. Aaron, how would you respond to that?
An example that comes to mind when I was in Rotaract, our Rotary Club had a matching grant to build a school for disabled children in Chile, Viña del Mar, Chile, and it was a bakery school. So they had the matching grant for the structure, but none of the funds could be used for supplies for the school. Because of the nature of matching grants. And so they asked the Rotaractors, hey, we're doing this project, would you please raise the money for the supplies? And we were able to take responsibility for an entire section of the project so that the Rotarians could focus on the more technical, the more difficult side, and were able to complement what they were doing.
Okay, that's wonderful. Mitty?
Well, I think I've already talked a little bit about how I think that Rotary International Conventions are huge eye-openers for young professionals, and by far possibly the greatest opportunity for a young professional to really get networked into a family that really helps each other. But what I want to touch upon is I think the biggest benefit and also untapped opportunity and potential here comes when you start asking Rotaractors and other new generations, Rotarians or else even Interactors and Rotarians, to get more involved at a Rotary level. And this is something that I think in my district, for District 5170, I was recently appointed Public Image Chair for my district. Now, this is a position that's generally held by a Rotarian. And I think there are a lot of young professionals who might be better suited for a social media chair for a district or even for a Rotary zone than maybe necessarily a Rotarian would be, as well as a number of different things like Director of Online Communications or anything like that. And it's just a matter of getting them more involved. And once you get them more involved, they're going to keep drinking that Kool-Aid that is Rotary, and they're going to, eventually join a Rotary Club, because they've committed so much time, because they get so much out of it too. And I think that's something where I'd like to see a lot more districts, a lot more zone directors, a lot more Rotary International Board directors, maybe even Rotary National presidents, start inviting more Rotaractors and new generations, young professionals, to actually sit in on a Rotary position. Maybe it's just an assistant position, but at least maybe shadow someone so that we can keep training the future of Rotary and we can keep the ball moving.
Yeah. Well, I think that leads beautifully into the next question, which I think is very important, and I am really interested in hearing the responses that each of you had to this question. What do you think more Rotarians should understand about involving young people in their clubs? And when I say clubs, let's also include districts and international as well. And we'll start with you, Erin, if we may.
So I have 3 thoughts on this topic. Number 1 is that it's important to understand that the younger generation's relationship with institutions is different than older generations. Younger generations have seen over the past 20 years or so, 10 to 20 years, institutions that can no longer support the needs of those supporting them. And so when we have the option of joining an institution or not, we're going to look at the viability of that institution. Does it just want me to serve it, or will it also serve me? And of course, Rotary is an institution that offers so much value to the members, but a lot of conversations about joining Rotary are about what you will do for the club. A lot of Rotarians who are interested in involving the young people want to know what those young people are going to do for the club. The single greatest skill that anyone interested in membership could develop is listening. Sit down and listen to a person and ask them questions until it is clear as daylight the positive value they could get out of being in Rotary, and then simply point it out to them. So that's thought number 1. Our relationship with institutions is different. Thought number 2 is that my experience is that the greatest value in Rotary happens in the background. The obvious part, the foreground of it, is going to a Rotary club, having your speaker, making a few announcements, chatting it up a bit, and leaving. But the meat of it is when you're at a service project. It's all of the meetings that happen outside of that where people are connecting and are having a real impact. So I would encourage all Rotary clubs, anytime you have a guest at your meeting, to have a quick roll call, so to speak, of projects or committees. International Service Committee, how is the project in Nairobi coming along? How about the Community Service Committee? Does anybody need to go to the mentoring thing this week? And even if you know the answers and the answer is no, do the roll call just so that the people who are visiting can see how much is happening in the background and that that's where the value truly lies. My last thought is in regard to projects. Often a Rotary Club says, okay, what project are we going to do next? Or they have a long-standing legacy project. And if you're having trouble getting momentum or getting the members to buy into these projects and support them, maybe there's a different way of evaluating what project to do. The Minneapolis South Club is really unique in that all of its projects stem out of the personal initiatives of the members. There's one member who is the principal of a charter school. There's another member who does business consulting and youth mentoring. There's another member who works with disabled children. And so when we need to know what project to work on, we ask people what's going on in their individual initiatives and how can the club support them. And you better believe people get into those projects.
Is the Minneapolis South Club going through your checklist every week?
Unfortunately, no, which is kind of where the idea came from, because when we did have visitors, I realized there was so much more that they couldn't see.
I liked your 3 points, and I would hope that at some point you would send those to me in an email or some format. So I think I'd like to write about that in my presidential message at one of the upcoming issues of the magazine. I think those were outstanding suggestions about how to strengthen a club, how to get members a little bit more involved, and how to get the community, when we bring guests or when we have speakers, to find out a little bit more about Rotary and the impact that we're making right where we live, not to mention where we don't live around the world. So thank you very much for those thoughts. Those were excellent.
A pleasure.
Christy, how would you respond? What do we need to tell Rotarians to get them to help them understand more about involving young people in our clubs?
I like what Erin had to say about this, because my answer is, I think, dovetails with her answer, which is, first of all, I think that I've seen lots of clubs attempt to attract young professionals and keep young professionals. And some clubs are very successful at this, and some clubs are not at all, or they just spin their wheels and don't get anywhere. And what I've discovered is that clubs that are spinning their wheels really treat young professionals and kind of new members in general as just bodies, like more workers and worker bees. Like, oh, more people to do our service project and more people to get this done, and if we can just get people busy on committees, then they're going to stay, but really that just burns people out. And clubs that have been more successful at keeping and retaining, or attracting and retaining younger people and just membership in general seem to do a great job of getting to know the people that they're bringing in, knowing what they're passionate about, knowing what they value, and finding a place for them that they can really shine and not just put them to work. And I think that when we, do that, doesn't matter the age, I think we just do better with membership in general, but especially with younger people, they have a lot of options to go give their time and energy, and, we need to be, I think more connected on an emotional level with them, and that should go better. The other thing that I think people need to understand about this younger generation is that they're extremely influential. Influence is sort of the new currency, and they're going to talk about their experiences in Rotary clubs and Rotaract clubs. Whether that's a good experience or a bad experience, that's up to us, but they're still going to go out, they're going to share their experience with their friends, they're going to share that experience on social media, in person with their families. It's a very influential sharing, especially the Gen Y millennial contingent is very good at that, and I think we don't acknowledge how powerful that is. And then just the quick third thing is I think we're really quick to make assumptions about what the younger generation is like. I'll go into Rotary clubs and be answering questions, and I'll often get the question about, it'll start out as a question, how do we attract younger members? Because younger members are like, younger people are like this, and they're like this, and they're like that, and we go right into the assumptions of what's wrong with them, and that's not attractive. That's not very nice. So just be really careful about not jumping to conclusions, because until you really get to know a person, you don't really know them. So those are some of my 3 thoughts about understanding the younger people.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think unfortunately a lot of people get into the stereotypical discussion, and it's sort of looking down their nose at the younger generations. And I think there's a mistake that's made when you make an assumption that everybody that's between 21 and 27 are exactly the same. Everybody that's between 61 and 67 are not the same. So you need to get to know that person. And I think your point about the image that we project is, what it's in our hands. And the best and the worst publicity that we can have is the image that we project about who we are and what we do. And I think it's critically important that we make that as positive as possible, certainly from a club perspective, but even as an individual member of a Rotary Club. Thank you very much. Alex, how would you respond?
I agree completely with what Aaron and Christy said. Thinking more of the even younger generation, kind of the Interact RILA group, I think Rotary is very much a grassroots organization, but it finds it difficult to allow Interact and RILA to do that. But the most successful Interact and RILAs that I've seen are the ones that are led by the youth itself. So I especially see this when a Rotary Club says, oh, I want to start an Interact Club at the high school, and they go and they talk to the principal. That never ends in a successful Interact Club from what I've seen. What works is finding a student that's really passionate about it and letting that student be the founder, be the person in charge, for example. I think it's very true that our generation has influence as our currency, and for a young person, being able to be that person that started something is huge, rather than having something imposed by the bigger institution. I think the same goes for RILA, where the reason RILA is so successful, in my opinion, is because it's youth working with youth. Those connections between young Rotarians or Rotaractors and those high school age people, I think, is more important than the connection that person makes with someone that they might associate with their grandparents, for example. So yeah, I think it's really important to have to allow those youth programs to be grassroots the way Rotary is grassroots.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think that's a little bit hard many times for older people to accept, but I think we've got to figure out a way to make that happen. Maybe how would you respond?
Wow, so many great responses by my fellow panelists. I think that covered like a huge portion of what I was going to say, so thank you guys. But I think a few things what hasn't been said yet, I don't think, but it's important to realize when you're dealing with young professionals or even young adults that we're very much a technology age-driven generation or series of generations, and in that sense, I mean, every Rotary Club, Rotarian should ask themselves, am I proud to show off my club website? Am I proud to show off my district's website? Because if the answer is no, the chances are a young professional is going to search you up on Google, on Bing, and they're going to look at your website and think, have they met since 1997? and if that's the question and that's the response that they get, you know, how can you expect to recruit a young professional when your website, which a lot of us, I think, provides that legitimacy for your club, isn't updated? And it's an issue I think every club needs to address, and I think the new Rotary.org changes great movement towards that, and it looks great. Of course, there are bugs, and we all know that. That's in the back end, and a random guest wouldn't know that, which is great. And moving forward, and the second thing I really want to touch upon is ask. I mean, there's so many times when Rotarians just assume, as mentioned before, I think by Christy, I think said it, but when people just think that people don't want to join Rotary, they don't make that transitional gap from Rotaract to Rotary perhaps, but maybe the answer is were they ever asked? And they weren't. They weren't ever asked to join your club. And the way a lot of Rotary clubs are set up is that it's an invite-only club, or it is that it feels like that way. So maybe the right answer is get young professionals more involved. You know, I think it's funny to hear that I just met a New Gens Rotarian, but basically she joined a Rotary club, or just went to a Rotary club meeting, and 2 weeks later she was doing their newsletter. I mean, it's putting commitment into the hands of new members that gets them really involved, and I think that's really important. And the last thing I want to touch upon, and kind of transition this maybe to your next question if you do, but we talk so much about getting new generations and young professionals involved in Rotaractors, Interactors, and Rotarians. Now, I hope this isn't too hard of a question, Mr. President, but my question, and this is also, I think, something that a lot of Rotaractors share, but why aren't Rotaractors and Interactors involved as ex officios on the board of directors? Why don't we have a seat in the Council of Legislation that happens every 3 years, especially for topics like changing the category of new generations to youth service, which I think was made with a lot of assumptions as opposed to maybe representatives from the organizations that we're trying to foster here, Rotaract and Interact.
That's a very good question, and I will come back with a response to those questions in just a second. I want to give Bilal a chance to chime in on this particular question as well, and give his thoughts, and I'll come back to you on that meeting. Bilal?
I guess regarding this integration between Rotarians and Rotaractors, we need always to be in, like, to put ourselves in the shoes of both sides. So if we want to see always what the Rotarians are looking to see in their clubs, there is this new blood that they want to see, then we need also to think how did this club reach there? How did this Rotary club, their legacy, everything. Yeah, I totally understand, and I agree with Mitty that we know our generation. It's this very fast, high-tech generation that needs everything to happen like in a break of a second. But still, I know a lot of Rotarians in our sponsoring club that have been Rotarians since the 50s maybe, and they were governors probably in the 70s and the 80s. So they have a legacy, and we need to understand this legacy, and we need to respect it as well. And change comes gradually, but it needs, as Mitty said, participation. We need to be there and discuss things more frequently and honestly and openly in places where decisions are to be taken for this organization called Rotaract or Interact or RILA even. So I totally agree with what everyone said, but still everyone should put his self in the shoes of the other and try to look at it from his own from the other's perspective.
Thank you very much. Get back to Mitty's question. Those are really very good questions, and they're very difficult questions. And I wish I had a better answer for you than I do. Why don't we have representation at the Council on Legislation from our new generations groups, other than the Rotarians who might be selected as a delegate from their district who has had international experience or local experience in these areas. I don't know that that's ever been addressed that I recall. That doesn't mean that it hasn't been. The council is our legislative body. They have the ultimate authority in our organization. But it certainly is something, in my opinion, that needs to be reviewed and looked at. And the same with the situation as it relates to perhaps even having a representative or a invited guest, if you will, whatever form that would take in terms of some seat at the board of directors or board of trustees for the foundation. And I think those are some things that we're going to have to take a serious look at as we move forward. If we're serious about really engaging our new generations and getting them involved and committed and making that transition easier, I think these are questions that we're going to have to address. That's not a great answer, Mitty. It's not probably what you really wanted to hear, but I think that's where we are at this point in time. So, do we have questions from the audience that we need to address before we run out of time here? Question is, and anybody can chime in on this and answer this question, would you have joined Rotaract back? Oh, is this to me? Oh, I would love to have joined Rotaract. I'm a guy that in high school, you may have heard me say this if you've heard me speak, I was in a high school organization similar to Interact. Unfortunately, I graduated from high school the year Interact started, which meant that in my hometown of Duncan, Oklahoma, there was absolutely zero chance that they were going to have an Interact club. I was very active in Key Club, and some of you may know what Key Club is. I was a lieutenant governor. I went to the Key Club International Convention that year between my junior and senior years in high school. When I got out of high school, I went to college. There was no Rotaract. There was no Circle K. There were other organizations, and I tried, and I did join some of those. When I graduated and got a real job, I thought somebody eventually would invite me to join Kiwanis because of my experience in Key Club. I've still never been invited to a Kiwanis club. I'm glad somebody invited me to Rotary and gave me this opportunity to do the job I'm getting to do right now. But somebody mentioned a minute ago about asking. You know, I would be delighted if somebody asked me, how can I become a member of your Rotary Club? But whether or not they ask me that, I'm going to ask them, would you please come to Rotary with me? I'd like to have you take a look at my club, and let's talk about Rotary. So, you know, I think and I don't call it a burden, I call it an opportunity. I think the opportunity is ours to share what we've been given by our affiliation with our experience in Rotary at whatever a group or whatever level you've had that experience, and to let others have that thing. We talked early on, some of you talked about how this experience had changed your life. And that's what the theme is all about. If we get excited about Rotary and we get excited about what we can do, what we can accomplish, not only individually but collectively, we're going to change a lot of lives. But the life that we're going to change the most is going to be our own. And that's an inevitable thing that happens, and we can't stop that. And what we need to do is we need to share that opportunity with others. There's another question. Is this one for me or? This, the question is, should Rotary try to encourage family-style clubs where entire family members participate? And that's a question from Philip Merritt. What do you think?
This is Erin. I run the district's social media presence, and we've been fortunate to have some public image grants support that. And I can tell you the market of people looking for service opportunities that they can do with their family in a meaningful and wholesome environment is enormous. I get questions from people all the time who say, hey, I love what you're doing. I have a 12-year-old son. Can he come? So for Rotarians who are opportunists and are willing to take meet needs as they exist, I say someone go experiment. That sounds like a great idea.
I agree. You know, when I was district governor many years ago, my children were small, and they went on my district governor visits, which was unheard of at the time. My kids have been to, my son's a member of the Rotary Club in his town where he works now. He's probably been to more Rotary International conventions than the whole club collectively, the rest of the members. So, you know, bring them along, make them a part of it. My wife is a charter member of her Rotary Club. We're not in the same club. My son is a Rotarian. My daughter has been a Rotarian. She is not now. She's homeschooling her kids and dealing with all kinds of sporting events because she's got a 12-year-old son and a 9-year-old daughter. But, you know, I think you just break that mold and you know, invite the people in. And if a husband and wife can be in the same club, that's wonderful. It didn't work for us because my club is the old club in town. It meets at noon, and her club is a cocktail club. And it's a lot of fun to go to. They even have wine. Let's see. Yeah, I think we would actually address that question. Did anyone else have a comment on the family aspect?
Yeah, I kind of do. In a way, I'd say that my family I'd say we're all members of my dad's Rotary Club. Whenever any of us go, whether it's for an Interact or a RILA or a youth exchange thing, I'd say my dad's Rotary Club welcomes us as if we were members. So in a way, I think we've kind of accomplished that without it being an official designation.
Yeah. Well, listen, I want to invite all of you to come to any and all of the New Generations conferences around the world if you get a chance. This is, of course, at no cost to Rotary, which is a phrase, if you aren't familiar with it, you will hear often as you move through your experience in Rotary. But we've got the one coming up next weekend in Chennai, India. In the first weekend in November, we'll be in Kampala, Uganda. Then in March, we'll be in Rosario, Argentina. And later in March, we should be out on the West Coast, probably somewhere in the San Francisco, San Jose area. We're still looking. They're still looking for that venue, and I haven't been advised yet exactly where that will be. And we'll finish those in Birmingham, England, in April. And again, this is where we plan to really listen to what the new generations are telling us, try to get a change of mindset of the Rotarians and the Rotary clubs to make them more welcoming, and you know, to be a little bit more flexible. Maybe do a satellite club, as was mentioned earlier, or maybe we start a new club, an evening club, or whatever the dictates of the community are in particularly. The other thing that I wanted to mention is I would really like to encourage anyone watching this to encourage the Rotary clubs that they're in to be much more open and inclusive of the new generations group, to include them as equal partners, to work together on not only the Rotary clubs projects, but on the Rotaract, Interact, or whatever projects are going on there. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't invite each of you to the Rotary International Convention in Sydney, 1 to 4 June 2014. I was at the Clinton Global Initiative last week, and I invited President Bill Clinton to come. I don't know if he'll do that or not. I hope that he will be a speaker for us, but it's going to be an exciting time, and hopefully we can move this bar just a little bit further down the road in including our new generations. And I'm very, very impressed with the quality of this panel and your thoughts, and I would encourage you to always feel free to share your thoughts with me on how we can do a better job of reaching out and making our transition more smooth, and how we can make the Rotary's inclusion of our new generations a more real objective.